Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to each of the four of you for being here today to educate us and discuss ways that we can look at reevaluating the role of the EPA in 2017 and beyond. Growing up in, fighting for, and subsequently representing Northeast Indiana before coming to Congress in the Indiana State House has made me aware of the many ways in which the EPA's policies impact hardworking constituents in my district, with citizens from every walk of life, from farmers to small business owners, workers, and even family members. I've heard from many of these constituents over the years raising concerns directed at the broad, burdensome, and relatively clandestine authority exercised by the EPA. So therefore, I've been a firm believer that our government, where authorized, should implement environmental policies based on sound science that focus on innovation rather than regulation. Sound science is the foundation of sound regulatory decision making. So with that, I'm fortunate to have an opportunity on this committee, and I thank the chairman for giving me the opportunity on this committee to be a part of investigating and reforming the EPA's regulatory power. And with that, I'll direct my first question to Mr. Holmstead. In your written testimony, you highlighted the importance of both scientific accuracy and transparency in the EPA's decision-making process. On that note, should the risk assessment process and the cost-benefit analysis process of the EPA be examined and reformed to make it more scientifically based and objective? And with that, what should Congress's role be in reforming that process?
I'll give you a short answer, and you might want to ask Mr. Belzer, who really has had much more experience in risk assessment. I think it is appropriate for Congress to step in and to institute some reforms that could improve the process. And I want to be clear, I think EPA does a lot of very important good things. But I also know from my own personal experience that there's some things that really do need to be reformed. We do enjoy a cleaner environment in large part because of EPA, but in some ways we pay up a lot more than we should for the protection that we get. There are better ways to do these things, and I think that's one of the things that this committee is looking at is, are there better ways for EPA to do its job?
Okay, thank you. And Dr. White, there used to be a time where EPA's Science Advisory Board and Clean Air Science Advisory Committee would issue reports with dissenting views. Now it seems like those bodies just come together in a general consensus that almost always aligns with environmental or conservation groups. Do you think the EPA's scientific advisory boards could do a better job at encouraging a broader or more transparent range of views?
Absolutely. The process needs to be balanced. I mentioned that earlier in my testimony today, that if you have balance on the committee, you're going to get dissenting views, and that information needs to be captured and considered by the agency. That's really the value of having an open and independent peer review process, is so that you get a really robust review of EPA's evaluation of the science and what it's going to use to make those decisions before they are finalized.
Okay, thank you. And back to you, Mr. Holmstead. Do you think it would help if the EPA presented its regulatory impact analysis in a more concise or easier to read format?
You know, I'm not quite sure how to answer that question, because sometimes when you make things too simple, you don't do justice to the complexities involved. So I agree that there's room for improvement. But again, you want to be sure that this documentation gives people enough information so that they understand that things aren't always quite as black and white as the agency would make them appear.
And then one final question for you that you might or might not agree with. The EPA has historically, in my opinion, had a shoot-first style of regulating. The agency issues a regulation before it is fully thought through whether it can be accomplished. How does this unnecessarily create burdens for businesses and manufacturers, or would you agree that it does?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think I've long been critical of one part of the Clean Air Act that imposes a legal requirement on states and local governments that in many cases is impossible to meet. It's just not achievable. And that has all kinds of implications for businesses that want to locate there. And I just don't think it makes any sense to give an agency authority to mandate things without considering whether they're achievable.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Thank